Dan is Van, episode 17. I'm going to talk about feedback, audio feedback, not the testimonials you get on your website, but more the screeching sounds that a PA system makes. What is feedback? Well, it's basically what happens when a microphone picks up too much of its own output through the speaker and then just basically cycles round. So the microphone goes into the speaker comes back to the microphone, goes through the speaker, and you get this building up of level, which results in a howl or a whistle, which is what feedback is. We've all been there, of course. We've set up for a wedding gig or some other function, and somebody's giving a speech. It could be a really emotional father of the bride speech, and somebody switches the PA system on, and it goes "Aah!" through the speaker. Yep, I've been there. It's not a good situation to find yourself in, and you find all the band members pointing at each other to say it was their fault. So, a few safety things need to be taken into consideration. So, for example, when you switch a PA system on, you need to make sure that the master faders of the mixing desk that you're using are completely shut. That is, they are down at minimum. And also, all the monitors are set to minimum as well. So that's the wedge monitors that you get on stage. Now, what are the causes of feedback? Well, as I said, if you turn a microphone up too loud, you are basically allowing the microphone to pick up its own output. That's how oscillators are designed for synthesizers, for example. Electronic circuits have feedback loops which enable it to generate a particular frequency that's been engineered by the components of that circuit. So, singers, if you've got a singer who's really quiet or somebody who's inexperienced with a microphone, that can be a major cause of feedback, where you're trying to amplify a singer and you're pushing up the mic to hear them through the PA, and then the thing will start feeding back because there's simply not enough level coming from that singer, not enough volume. So you do find that with a lot of singers who only use mics is that they don't learn how to project, and therefore they have a very, very low vocal level. Now, the problem isn't confined just to singers. Acoustic guitars that are not very good, for example, who have that have a pickup inside the guitar and then a little preamp on the side, or sometimes there's no preamp at all, it's just a jack plug that you plug in. Now, acoustic guitars, they're a box. It's a giant microphone, essentially, for problems that may exist in the PA system or indeed the venue concerned. So you get problems where you turn an acoustic guitar up and it just feeds back through the monitor. It's not the mic, a vocal mic per se, it's the pickup inside the guitar. In electric guitars, it's a bit different, where feedback is actually a desirable effect if you've got a drive channel switched in. Jimi Hendrix, he pioneered that sort of effect. And that's fine because that's largely controllable. You can just turn the volume down of the guitar, the feedback goes away. Or you can just back it off slightly and the feedback diminishes. So it's very much something you can be in control of. Whereas feedback on a PA system very often becomes uncontrollable. It simply sails off into the distance until the maximum output level of the PA system is reached, and then it won't get any louder. However, if it's loud enough, you can cook speakers with it quite effectively. This problem also manifests itself in stage monitoring. Now, usually you would have somebody with a microphone and the stage monitor would be straight down on the floor facing you directly. So it's 180 degrees out with respect to your microphone. That's fine. And generally speaking, your average dynamic mic will pick up very, very little from behind the mic. It's all in front of it, i.e. your mouth or the instrumentalist. But it will still pick up bits and pieces from the sides. So if you have stage monitors that are next to you instead of directly in front of you, you're inviting one or two problems with that. Now, how do you get rid of feedback of a particular feedback frequency? If it's just inherent in the venue, for example, if you've got a PA in a particular building, there are going to be what's called resonant frequencies in that building, where you have, something like 500 hertz, for example, which is a B above middle C, is going to be amplified maybe more easily than 400, which is a G. It could be that your feedback frequency is the B and not the G. Well, how am I going to get rid of this? Well, you can get automatic feedback destroyers, which search for these feedback frequencies and then apply what's called a notch filter. So it just takes out that particular frequency. The more expensive ones work very well, but don't buy the cheap ones because they don't really work at all. They think they found the frequency, and actually it's a harmonic of that frequency, and the feedback is just going to sail off into the distance. If you go into a big venue, you will very often see rows of little sliders in a rack unit. So that's a graphic equalizer. And the best venues will have something called a third octave graphic equalizer. So across your frequency band from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz, there will be a 31 band graphic equalizer. So you have 20 hertz, then 25 hertz, then 32, then on all of these frequencies that go all the way up. And generally what happens is, in order to set one of these up for the monitors, you would push the level, the overall volume level with no band playing at all, just silence. You would push the level up until you find the beginnings of a feedback frequency, and then you can just find it on the graphic equalizer and notch it out. Now, some engineers can do this by ear. I've got perfect pitch, which means I can tell what note is without external reference. And if you know what a note is, you can, generally speaking, work out what the frequency is and then notch that accordingly. Now, in practice, what you would do is you would notch out the particular frequency and something just to the sides of it. So the sliders adjacent, you might reduce those as well, which means that it's going to be less sort of direct with that frequency. You'll have a frequency response that's a little bit more sympathetic overall. Of course, we can never achieve the perfect flat frequency response in a venue. Venues have little sort of gremlins and little sort of resonances. Microphones have resonances, where the monitors are, how many people there are in the venue, what they're wearing, all sorts of things come into play. So we're never going to achieve the absolute perfect result, but we can get pretty close with these sort of measures. Now, once you've found that feedback frequency, it might be in the middle, you can keep pushing the level up and you'll hear another feedback frequency. Generally speaking, it's going to be the top end one, or rather further up into your treble response, so you can find another one, and then you push it up even further, and then the bass one. Now, that doesn't always appear in that order, but you can notch out all these feedback frequencies, which means you've got what's called headroom. When the band's playing, you know you can push those levels of your PA system up with less risk of feedback than was hitherto sort of evident without the graphic equalizer. Now, you have things called parametric equalizers now, which can be software as well. So you can actually use a computer to notch feedback frequencies, and things like spectrum analysis allow a display to show you where that feedback frequency is. And then you just find that frequency, set a Q filter that's called quality filter to quite a narrow band, and then just start to cut it. Don't cut it all the way, because you probably won't need to. You can just cut it some and it'll get rid of that feedback frequency. If you start notching out stuff that is really, really draconian, some notes of the band, you're going to get holes in your frequency response, and you don't want that. You want to try and reproduce what's on stage. Now, as I said, guitars, they are not immune to this. You have an acoustic guitarist. If the acoustic guitar is moving about on stage, generally with vocals, you're going to be stood with a microphone and you've got your monitor. But if the guitar moves about, if the guitarist is turning around and facing other members of the band, you are sort of, risking feedback. So with an acoustic guitar amplifier, that is a little sort of set of dials on top of the guitar, you should really ideally get the guitarist to set all their equalization levels centrally and with the volume about 70% of the way up, maybe even higher, because you don't want the guitarist to start changing lots of sounds, because generally speaking, the equalizer on an acoustic guitar is very, very, very powerful. So if you've got a mid-range control, it'll ramp it right up. So really you want the guitarist to sort of leave those controls alone, or give them instruction, could we have a little bit more mid-range on your pickup perhaps, for the PA, and then the PA engineer has the finer control over the tone controls out the front or front of house. The number of monitors you have on stage will increase the risk of feedback and the level at which they're at. So generally speaking, a PA engineer who's worth their salt and has a sort of, let's say, a sort of political sensitivity towards a band will know how to ask a band to turn down on stage. It's very important. Of course, a drummer is more difficult. But generally speaking, if you've got an electric guitarist, bass guitarists, keyboard players on stage with monitor amps, you want the level to come right down, because feedback that occurs in a monitor will also be transmitted to the front of house and vice versa. If you've got feedback frequencies everywhere, they will just appear everywhere in your setup. So it's a very, very tricky situation, and it can be utter hell to try and get rid of feedback. But generally speaking, when you're setting up for any gig, make sure the monitor, the main PA outputs are down, and that the aux outputs, which is what feeds your monitors, are all the way down. And only when you've set your mics up on your input channels of your mixing desk should you start tweaking volumes that involve anything that's a speaker.